Hello, and welcome to the Great Great Show with Jenell. I'm your host, Jenell, and I'm utterly delighted to offer you a very special co host. Her name is Allison Israel. Allison, would you like to greet our listeners?
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. So, I'd like to shout out how Allison and I know each other, if that'd be okay with you, Allison.
Yes, let's go.
We are part of the same writing program called Punchy Books Accelerator. It's by Matt Rudinsky, if I pronounced that correctly. And we became accountability partners in books that we simultaneously were writing on our own. And when we connected to have our first phone call, would you say this is accurate? We just connected instantly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we connected instantly. I mean, we started calling each other soul sisters, which is kind of a silly thing to call each other, but that is what Allison has become to me. She has become my soul sister through this whole process. And I'm excited to announce that my book should be ready on Amazon by May 1st of 2024. If you're interested in it, it's called Bok Choi's Bike Ride by Jenell Nyberg. And yeah, we're very excited. I have to say, it was quite for me, it was just a personal, I don't quite have the words for what it meant. I'd been wanting to write this book for over 15 years and I finally did it. And I just want to say, if you feel like you have a book inside of you that a part of you is desperate to write, I think that Matt's program could possibly really help you. And I will link his info in the comments below if you're interested in his program, because I just can't say enough about it. Because not only does he walk you through the technicalities of how to actually write a book, he starts first by walking you through your mental blocks about why you haven't already written the book. And that actually was more valuable than any other thing I got from the program. So yeah, just shout out to Matt. And
And I'd really like to, oh my goodness, Jenell, like getting to be a small part of just watching you through this process and then getting to read your book and your voice has been such an inspiration to me, and your honesty and your passion, your adventure. And I just, you inspire me to step up with my adventures and some of the things that I've learned and some of the struggles that I've overcome. And I really I'm very inspired by you.
oh,
Absolutely.
thanks. And I didn't really lay it out to our listeners, but if you're here on this podcast because you are interested in talking about mental health topics, because that's what we generally do in the Great Great Shows, we have a roughly talk about a mental health topic. It's my bike ride was a story about when I was 24, after recently being diagnosed with bipolar type 1. I found myself homeless and broke, living on a friend's couch. And then I bought a bicycle for $10 and rode it solo across the country to my cousin's wedding. And it was a very much like, for me, it was a story of redemption. I mean, I'm not trying to be too big, but for me, it was this pivotal time in my 20s, a pivotal time in my mental health journey. And yeah, it was a story that I really needed to it was a story that I needed to write. What's been really exciting is with me and Allison being accountability partners, is I've been getting to get little insights on her and the writing journey she's been going on. And I would just kind of like to open the floor to you, Allison, to share a little bit about the teachers you're working under and the projects you're working on right now.
Thank you so much. And it's been an interesting adventure as well. And I had a similar opportunity in my 20s to take some time out of the norm and have adventures, a solo adventure. And I was led to, first of all, within the normals, academia, when I went to school, I happened upon anthropology and philosophy and started reading about other cultures that had rich spiritual and cultural ancestry, about different ways of being, different ways of thought, different ways of practice that had opened my eyes, and started helping me understand things that I didn't quite always know how I didn't fit into society. So I really enjoyed reading Eastern philosophy and um, including, what I came to understand the differences between Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, Eastern um, modalities of health and Western modalities of health, and then over the years coming to integrate them the best that I could in my own mental, physical, and spiritual health.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable sharing with our audience a little bit about your health history and background, both physical and mental, whatever you're comfortable sharing?
Sure. I come from a wonderfully rich ancestry of mostly Eastern European Jews who have overcome a lot of obstacles and a lot of very intelligent um, people who had the insight to move away from hostile situations, or else I wouldn't be here. Many
Mm.
different countries where my ancestors were being persecuted. And if they didn't move, I wouldn't be here. So, different countries, Poland, Russia, Germany, Hungary, and my great grandparents all came to America. And because of that, the Jewish people have a culture that's unlike a lot of other cultures, that it's not associated with a land. So it's one of the few religions that's actually also an ethnicity not associated with an actual
Mhm.
land, because we have to adapt to wherever we are. And I'm very proud to be, what my brother did, the DNA test, and we're 99.6% Eastern European Jew, and we're very resilient. That does come with quite a bit of mental health issues, just genetically. Um, and you can understand the generational trauma that comes with, generation after generation of being persecuted and
Absolutely.
having to hide your own um, traditions and belief systems, and being blamed for situations going on in the world and continuing, and it's actually escalating in our own country right now, anti-Semitism,
Mhm.
which is something that we like to talk about and bring current, because people continue to try to this day deny that the Holocaust happened and things like that. And education and awareness is always very important. But my own family suffers from a lot of anxiety, depression. Uh, there's I don't know formally about a lot of diagnosis, because there wasn't a lot of opportunity for some of my ancestors to get formal diagnosis. Um, but growing up, from a very young age, I had phobias, I had anxiety. Um, and then after my first child, I definitely suffered from postpartum depression. And then after my second child, it was clear that I was struggling with some anxiety and sleep problems. So over time, we discovered that there's hormonal issues, started to notice that the bipolar one was definitely occurring related to hormones. And then I've discovered that, you know, cycles of medication along with meditation and acupuncture and massage and qigong and a lot of different techniques all come together to make me feel whole, complete, and well throughout the day.
You mentioned briefly a diagnosis of bipolar type 1,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure how much stock you put into that. Um, But I know that we've both talked about how people with bipolar need more grounding. That
Mhm.
we don't necessarily have as much problem opening our crown chakra and receiving. We need to be grounded. And you've really talked about your qigong practice as a very grounding uh,
Mhm.
practice. I was just wondering if you would speak to just our listeners more about for you what kind of meditation and just what kind of meditation practices you use to specifically support your mental wellness.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, um for years I enjoy also seeking that kind of astral traveling kind of, you want to feel like you're connecting with the expansive universe as well, and but grounded and connected and feeling safe and connected and rooted into the earth. But Tai Chi is very much, and all Eastern practices are very much about balance. So that's what I like, as someone who has that tendency to want to go to extremes, when that's the challenge with the bipolar is,
So
you know,
then
yeah.
for our listeners who don't know, who think Tai Chi
Hmm.
is just standing in a park and moving your hands like in a weird way, could you give
Hmm.
our listeners an
Sure,
idea of what Qigong, actually the difference between Qigong and Tai Chi is, and then what it
sure,
really represents, the movements?
sure. So Qigong is the mother art of Tai Chi, and the word Qi represents life force. So that's just the energy that is the root of all things in the universe. And when we study Qigong as just a healing exercise movement that is natural, connected to the breath, um, and then Tai Chi is something that you would study over time after practicing Qigong, which is very similar to different types of yoga, um, that strengthen and stretch, connected to breathing, of course. And you would, over time, as you got practiced with Qigong, then you would practice the form of Tai Chi. And there's different forms of Tai Chi, which is a form of martial art that is, you know, self defense as well as a beautiful art form of movement that is very um, peaceful and naturally move, based on a lot of movements of animals in nature that can bring a lot of peace of mind. Yes.
And so is the idea that like from the waist down, you are grounded to the center of the earth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, yeah, the root from the waist down, you're rooted to the earth. And then from the waist up, you're very light. Oftentimes you're going to imagine that. And then the middle is the Dantian, which we talk about. The heaven is the bridge. We are, as humans, we're the bridge between earth and sky. And from the waist down, we're rooted into the earth. And like a tree, the trunk is strong, but the leaves are very light and supple. And so our arms are always very light and moving like silk threads in the wind. But our legs are strong and firm. And our movements from our arms are often coming from the movements of our legs and our hips. And there's a lot of circular movements. So our breath, our inhales, our inhalations are going to bring us in the circular movements that make us so connected and aware of our internal movements. That's why they call it an internal art form. You're really very aware of the connectedness of your body and the natural movements that are inherent in your body.
Thank you for sharing about this. I now you've been practicing qigong and tai chi for quite a while. Didn't you start in Arizona at a very special place? Do I have this in my memory correct?
Yes, that was back in about 94. So yes, about I guess it's been about 30 years. And I feel very fortunate that I've had this as a part of my life. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's making me want to just find a place where I can pursue this. I don't really know where, locally, and I kind of get that it's a thing you wanna be doing out in nature, not in front of a YouTube video in your house.
Yeah, I mean, I find that a lot of really special people out there, sometimes you can find them at the YMCA, and sometimes you find them in the park, and sometimes you can find some really special people. I've connected with them on YouTube, and I've been quite surprised to find some special people out there too. And like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and it's amazing how when you put it out there, how they find you.
Well, then maybe I'll put a little shout out. Maybe I'll even do it. Maybe I'll link it under this video. Like, hey, if you're in the central Iowa location and you want to do some
Sure.
Tai Chi or some Qigong, uh, hook me up. Let's get
You
together.
might be surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your meditation practice? I know that a couple months ago, actually it was a while ago, you had sent me this really beautiful fire meditation by Ram Dass. And you have,
Mhm.
I feel like, mentioned to me on many occasions that Ram Dass is one of your teachers. Is that accurate to say?
Yes. And I'm glad you actually asked that because one of the things that I'm learning a lot recently from my current meditation teacher, I do really recommend um, people to seek meditation teachers. Um, I mean, of course, we like to read books and do a lot of soul searching ourselves, but there's a lot that we can learn when we're starting to meditate. Um, and something that can help us is when we start to learn how to do what I call what we've learned actually formal meditation is when we sit down intentionally to focus on an actual intended meditation. Okay, so we're one of the things that we might be surprised to learn is that it doesn't necessarily bring this peaceful feeling or a blissed out feeling or like empty thoughts or slow down thoughts or less um worries or anything like that. The whole purpose is to just start to be able to observe what's happening in our mind and to start studying our minds. And when we become more aware, it's really very important for us to start to practice improving our awareness. And practicing improving our awareness can improve a lot of things in our lives. And
Absolutely.
that's the essence of qigong, tai chi, yoga, any type of of hobby, really. I mean, that's what's in gardening, knitting. It's really this concentration and awareness that can enrich our lives. Um, so there's a practice that I think sometimes when we sit down to meditate and we might judge ourselves and we say, well, I'm not feeling peaceful, so I'm not doing it right and I'm not going to do it again tomorrow. And I ask for those of us who have that reaction, just have a little patience with yourself and come back to it again tomorrow and revisit it and just create this sort of open awareness and natural curiosity with yourself and your own thoughts, to just view what's occurring in your mind. And let's just not have an expectation as to what we're going to find when we sit in meditation.
Yeah, I
And
love how.
another,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, I just love how Ram Dass makes it so accessible to a beginner. Like in that fire
Yes,
meditation, he says, "We sit and meditate. What does that look like?" He goes, "Quiet the mind, open the heart." He's like, "Quiet the mind, open the heart." And he goes,
yes,
how do we open the heart?" He says, "You focus on what you can love right now, and then you expand that." And I remember when the first time I was listening to that meditation, I was about to eat a Fuji apple, and Fuji apples are my most favorite apple. And so I was like, I'm holding this beautiful apple in my hand. I'm like, I love this apple. It's going to nourish my body. And then I realized I had this enormous when I was done with the meditation, I ate the apple. A very simple thing. I listened to a meditation for 7 minutes and then I ate an apple. And I had this overwhelming just gratitude for this food that's nourishing me, which is like very in line with my Christian beliefs of how you want to like be before a meal, of just gratitude and thankfulness.
wonderful. Perfect example of that. I love that. And that is where, right, I really do love, Ram Dass has brought me a lot of joy with the simplicity of the everyday practice of just appreciating um, every little thing in within the day. And that I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's another thing that we can do throughout the day. And meditation is something that we can also do with our eyes open. I'm really consciously learning this recently. So, because we're trying to bring awareness to our everyday life and more consciously, even within our interactions and relationships, well, how do we do that? We are often relating to other people with our eyes open. So when we're aware of our own minds, let's practice more and more with our eyes open. And I'm very fascinated by this, and starting to, meditate with your eyes open. It's like a whole new world, especially after, almost 30 years of meditating with your eyes closed. So it's going to take a minute.
Well, I hope you enjoy your journey. It sounds fun. Okay, Allison. So at the beginning of this podcast, we were sharing about the different writers' projects we were working on. And I don't know if I've communicated this to our audience, but Allison and I actually have never physically been in the same location. We've always had a virtual remote experience. I live out of central Iowa and Allison travels. Where are you located right now, Allison?
I am in Port Townsend, Washington right
In
now.
Washington. Yes. So
Hmm.
we were talking on the phone the other night, and Allison was so excited about her writing program that we're going to link below, but she was talking about something called a writer's spine. And I just know a lot of our listeners, a lot of people with mental health diagnoses are creative types. Wouldn't you say that's true, Allison?
Oh, absolutely.
And I know that there's just a lot who are aspiring to be writers, to share their stories, share their perspectives. And so I just kind of want to take a moment to share this new idea that Allison's exploring in her writing class, called the writer's spine. Allison, if you just want to take over.
Yes, there's a wonderful program. My teacher, Anya Rumbo, the method in the madness, is just this wonderful. I mean, it's even the madness is in the title. Okay, so this whole concept of creativity is very much related to this exciting other world of, unpredictability, and not necessarily something that we've ever seen before. And we want that, but we also, it doesn't have to be a scary, violent, you know, um, world that leads to substance abuse and violence and like some of the authors of the past have led those lives. So what I love about Writing Down the Bones, Natalie Goldberg, and a lot of her books have, and her whole life mission um, has been about creating this space for creatives of all types, not just writers, but painters, dancers, poets, whatever modality that creative types have felt like we love to create. But at the end of the day, how do we live our lives without feeling chaotic?
Mm.
And she's created this modality based on Zen and Buddhism that is 2,500 years old. It's very scientific, evidence based, rooted in very balanced, grounded science that can help us at the end of the day with our relationships and with our routines, feel connected. So the writer's spine makes you not need the published book to feel external approval and to feel validated. You just enjoy writing for writing's sake. You enjoy the actual process of writing and you develop a strong writer's spine. And so these are all practices, and you don't need to drink when you're done writing to release all of that tension, because you have this connectedness with who you are and why you're here. And that's we're all developing that, and it's a work in progress, of course, but it feels very real to me right now in this class where I am taking a class as part of the Method in the Madness Institute. And it really does feel like I have a practice that I can rely to. And I go back to my writing practice, which is very much part of the Writing Down the Bones practice that she's taught Natalie Goldberg and all of her students now. A lot of her students have taught courses based on classes that they've taken from her. And it's really empowering to sit down every morning with your writing practice and you can return to that practice and you have a technique. So when you feel a lot of emotions coming up, you have a practice to return to and you have a root, you have something within you, and you're not needing to go and have some kind of control over. We can't control the weather, but we can control the stillness of the pond that reflects the beautiful moon. And
Yes,
that's what
see,
we're here
oh,
to
sorry, I cut you off.
do.
You're saying something very poetic and I cut you off. I'm so sorry. I was gonna say,
It's
like,
okay.
yeah, we can't control the weather. So many things we can't control, but we can control like our daily practices. Like we can
Yes.
control today I've set aside 30 minutes at this time. And I really liked how you said that having this daily practice has been grounding for you. So that's this thing I want to keep coming back to. And I just really want to speak to the community of people with bipolar who are listening to this podcast, because I just want to like tell you, like, I get the struggle. I get that you want your crown chakra totally open, receiving and getting it all. It's exciting, it's wonderful. And just the truth is, to be good in this world, we really, really have to focus extra attention on being grounded. If we want to be good parents, if we want to be good siblings, if we want to be good friends, if we want to be good to do a good service to our works of art, we have to stay grounded. And if there's a way to do that while nurturing our I just say, let's jump on it.
Yes. Yeah. And I see now I really feel like we're in the flow, and that's what starts to happen. You get through some of the discomfort of that's just natural through any practice. That's why it's called practice. We keep practicing. We learned just yesterday that some people who for many, many years, for example, a lady did share personally that she actually needed to do the meditation for her mental health. but she didn't enjoy it at all. But she knew she just had to do it. But she found over the years that she's actually gotten much more out of it than some of her friends who had that peaceful reaction to meditation because of some of the, I don't know if it's like the roots that you dig up through the suffering, through the difficult meditations that you get to see. It's just like the sand that in the clam shell, in the oyster shell, that the sand that rubs together makes the pearl.
Mm.
It's a difficult process, you know. The iron sharpens iron, you know. Suffering can make some beautiful things. And we realize that, yes, we want to be able to ground down for our loved ones. We want to be here for the long haul. And so, with those of us that have some mood disorders and have struggled to make the right choices and to stick to our routines, especially on the days where it really doesn't feel good, it can feel torturous. It can feel torturous to take that shower, wash the hair, um, fold the clothes, make the bed, and to do those things. Some days it really is fun and we're just loving it and we're really grateful for the routines. And some days we're just like, oh my gosh, you know, I'd rather be at the dentist's office than do my routine. But we're doing it um for our loved ones, but also for this larger, it's a worldview. It's
I was
why
going to
we're
say
here.
cosmic purpose.
Yes, yes.
Cosmic purpose.
I love it. I love it. It's a bigger story and we're all connected in it. And that's what's pretty fun. You know, part of what the science of the mind, it's really the mind. Everybody's mind works in the same way when you study the mind. And I know that in the West, we like to focus on everybody's uniqueness and individuality. But the science of the mind is it's everybody's mind works the same way. Um, and that's, to me, it's liberating. That's good news. Of course, we all have different degrees of suffering and struggle, but the fact that everybody's mind is constantly coming up with thought after thought after thought after thought, then how do we manage that? And there's techniques to do that, and we can just resort to the experts, and we don't have to each suffer in silence and reinvent the wheel. So
I love it.
thank you,
So,
Jenell.
oh yeah. So, for you, if I can just segue into this
Sure.
topic real quick, as someone who is ethnically Jewish,
Hmm.
but has a personal relationship with Jesus, we haven't really talked
Yeah,
about that. And then you also, if this is fair to say, have embraced some Eastern modalities without compromising those traditions. Is that fair
sure.
to say?
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering how you could, if you could address anyone in our audience who, for example, I'm going to kind of use an example. I know in my sister's school, one of the parents was upset with the guidance counselor because he was teaching mindfulness to the students, and the parent thought that was like a Buddhist, Eastern
Hmm.
philosophy, religion type thing that was in contradiction to Christianity. Even though mindfulness is rooted in science and we have the science behind it, he thought it was contradicting a spiritual belief that their family had. And so I'm just curious if you have any words of advice or wisdom for someone from your personal journey and how you've been able to integrate so much for someone else who might want to think about other things and maybe they haven't been in an environment where they're supported to think outside the box maybe or the norm.
Yeah, I mean, education is always very important, and just helping people learn as much as they can and feel safe to read more and to learn more and just really taking the time, because I remember when I was teaching Tai Chi at the women's shelter years ago, and one of the ladies said that she couldn't take she wouldn't participate because she was Christian and she thought it was a religion. And it's just like when yoga first came to the United States, it was a similar response. And it's like people thought it was a religion. And so it's sort of like the analogy that comes to me is like if someone wouldn't do their physical therapy exercises because they felt like it was religious. It's a technique. There is
Mm.
it's like, or brush their teeth because it's based in, you know, um, Western science. Like if someone who was, Eastern science based, and so I really ask for people just to take a moment and to do the research themselves and to see that mindfulness, the book that our current class is based on is called Mindfulness, an 8-week plan for finding peace in a frantic world, by Mark Williams and Danny Pendman. And this book particularly addresses that. They because the teachers and the authors here, and John Kabat-Zinn, who actually writes the foreword and is a particular expert on mindfulness, even mentions in one particular writing that he is not a Buddhist, but he is very into the Buddhist techniques.
Mm.
Now, I I don't even have the aversion to say that necessarily myself. Um, but because I like the fact that I'm a Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, I don't have the issue to say those things. I feel that the religions offer a lot of beautiful, whole, complete stories, foundations that we can glean. And I don't see the contradiction in being all of the above. Life of Pi, where the dad was like, if you add any more religions, you're never going to have to work a day in your life. You know how, because there's the holidays, you'll have a holiday every day, um, a holy day. And it's just who some of us are. We see the oneness in all of it. I say oneness because Thich Nhat Hanh, that's how he pronounced, oneness. We're just here, and I see the beauty in it all. But mindfulness is definitely a science. It's evidence-based. You can go on to the National Institutes of Health and you can see all the very scientific research that has proven it's actually more effective than antidepressants. It's like all in the book, but I mean, this is an Oxford-based program where if someone actually goes off of their meds, if they've struggled from, medicine resistant depression, this 8-week mindfulness program is more effective if you go off of your medicine than if you stay on your medicine. I mean, that's ridiculous results. Okay. And so you can't tell me that this is religion, because religion doesn't have those results, actually. And we're all just trying to do the best we can. And we don't want to judge each other, and we don't want to judge the judgers. And we're hoping that when somebody has misinformation, that we can use compassion, peace, love, and wisdom, to take the time to help them see that these are just tools that can add to their practice. And I would like to help people within churches to see that this is wonderful, because it's just more specific techniques to help enhance their prayer and their meditation practice.
Absolutely. So, I'd like to share a little bit with our audience that I, at one point, was one of those people who said yoga is evil. I'm going to tell you why I thought that, why I believed something so ignorant, and then how I was able to step out of it.
Okay.
So one, I come from a very strict evangelical background. My father was a pastor, and then when he stopped being a pastor, we went to an evangelical free church, which was very much like you listen to your male pastor and you do exactly what he interprets the Bible to be. It's very Bible-based believing, very patriarchal. And there was a pastor that we studied under as a church called KP Yohanan, who started a ministry called Gospel for Asia. And I was really excited about it. It was a really cool gospel because a lot of people in like India and China, in some places, like they don't have access to the Bible. And one thing that Gospel for Asia does is it gets them the Bible through the radio. So it's super subversive. They'll meet for church in basements and they'll transcribe the Bible and we'll broadcast the Bible. I thought it was really a great ministry, but the founder of it just said that when he came from India to America with $8 in his pocket and he saw that churches were actually hosting yoga, he said it made him sick to his stomach because he knew that yoga, this is me as like a 12-year-old hearing this message, that yoga existed so that you could imitate the poses of demons and hold space for that in worship.
Whoa.
Okay. So I'm like, okay, then I'm just not going to participate in yoga. That's just not for me. It's sweeping over the country and like, I'm like, well, we're being deceived. And then you go to church and then the pastor says, everyone's deceived except us because we have the true gospel. Like I was getting that and I was like, okay, and then I remember at one point, actually, it was I was working in ministry. I was working in this ministry. It's all women's ministry, and my boss taught Christian yoga, and I was trying to explain to her how I just didn't feel comfortable participating in it, and she really tried to get to me on a level that, like, she really wanted to get to me on a level that I could understand. So she said, Jenell, who owns this pose? And she got down on her knees and got in the prayerful position with her hands. She said, who owns this pose? And she said, it's universal. Any religion can have this pose.
Yeah.
And she was kind of saying like,
yeah. One of the things that I'm understanding about the mindfulness techniques, which are all rooted in Buddhism, which is 22,500 years old, is that our nature is goodness. Everybody's innate nature is compassion. We're all trying to alleviate our suffering and the suffering of others.
and that is in direct contradiction to the evangelical worldview.
And it's okay because even that evangelical perspective is an attempt to alleviate their suffering and the suffering of others. And we can see that because they're just trying to understand this crazy world and the suffering that happens to so many. And you can see that in the child's eyes, right? When somebody's hurt and somebody's crying, they're just trying to understand and make sense of it. And as we get older, sometimes we can see a little bit beyond that, and we trust and we have a little bit more faith in the honor system, and that a technique, first of all, yoga and a lot of the qigong moves and a lot of the yoga moves are natural moves that people have discovered animals and babies do. You can watch a cat and a dog and a baby do, and they just get up and do half of those moves.
Yeah, I love it.
If not all of them. And then we start to pay attention to things around us. Oh, if we pay attention, which is what those words mean in any of the meditations, it just means paying attention. We learned the other day, we're going to do a formal meditation, which means we're going to focus. And then she said, because she was teasing us, because an informal meditation is the rest of the day. And I was like, that's so cool. Because I'm starting to notice whenever you're aware that you're aware, you're meditating.
Yes.
If you notice, so she said, do you notice that you're hearing that bird? You're meditating. It's that simple. Now, I'm not saying that you can do that all day very easily, but you can keep bringing your awareness back to your awareness. And over time, with practice, just like any other practice, you can get very good at it and get very mindful. And it does improve your overall health. They've shown this, the studies are ridiculous. Within 8 weeks, people's immune systems get better, their relationships get better, their sleep patterns get better, their satisfaction of life gets better. I
Have
mean,
you
this is
gone
an
through the
eight.
whole book, or what chapter are you at on this book?
So this is a unique program based. We're doing it different than the standard, like the 8 week. If you read the book,
Okay.
and so we're doing it very thoroughly and slowly, which is important to me as someone who's been practicing for 30 years. I have no hurry to rush through it and do it in 8 weeks. I'm in an intensive year-long program. No, I'm just so excited, Jenell, because I've done so much work. I've gotten to the point where I'm ready to get, you know, down and dirty, deep into a level of understanding my mind, writing on this level that it feels like I'm uncovering the treasure, you
Oh
know?
my gosh, yes. I was gonna say, if this is a year-long program, we've got to get updates throughout your experience with the program, at least throughout this year. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full podcast, but even just getting little updates on like where you're at, what little treasures you're
Oh,
discovering. If you
I
could
love that.
if you could just keep a notebook of like little ideas or page numbers, like, oh, I'd love to share this with our listeners. We could do little updates.
Oh, I love that. And in fact, that would be a lovely, what do you call it? Like a diary for
Yeah,
me to look back over time. So
yeah,
I would love to do that. Like, I mean, to be honest, every month, because
yeah.
it's so intensive. Like, I wish I had that with my Tai Chi class 30 years ago, because I remember my life changing forever just from, and I didn't really, because the form is a 20-minute form, and I don't remember the whole form anymore. I only do the beginning part because it's just so detailed. Um, but it changed my life just taking that kind of time that it requires. And that's what I ask people to do. There is never, there are no mistakes. In fact, one of the Rinpoches, and I wish I could remember which one it is right now, but said, failure is the mother of success. And that's just blowing me away. Nothing we do is, something that we need to regret. All the things, all of our suffering, all of the things are fodder for our current, opportunities. So when I'm getting so excited about just taking this slow train to learning about my mind and learning about some of the twists and turns of my creative process, and like I've told you, Jenell, on our phone conversations, that I'm super jealous of the fact that I'm what, like 20 years older than you. You've written actually multiple books. Now, I know this is your first published book, but you've written multiple books. You've finished multiple manuscripts. I'm 52 and I have yet to finish a manuscript. I'm not afraid of saying that. And I'm very much excited for the fact and inspired by the fact that you're very productive. You are very outright and truthful about your diagnosis, and you're so productive. And I'm like, you know what? Every day I think Jenell can do it. I can do it. And
Mm.
I put that in my pipe and I smoke it. And I'm like, I am going to get my stuff done. But at the same time, I'm not in a hurry, if that makes
I
sense.
love
You
it.
know what I mean?
Because it's funny how, because we have a 2-hour time difference, right? So we started recording at 11 Allison's time, 1 o'clock my time. And Allison was like, oh, I mean, I thought we were talking on the phone. And we're just like, oh, I'm glad we're getting this podcast done before noon. It's helping me get ready. And I'm like, what you don't know is that today I slept in until it was time to do this podcast. And, like, oh, am I really so productive? Because like when I can take a nap, I will take a nap.
Well, that is, and you and I are so similar. And I think that's, I mean, and we've talked about this too. I feel very blessed with the bipolar disorder diagnosis, because there's a huge extreme that we're always faced with. And self-care is so high on my priority list that I think is an advantage for us over the average
I
person who,
agree. We have permission to
right,
take it.
in permission to take it. Where so many of my girlfriends do not give themselves permission to do things like eat, sleep, go to the bathroom. And if they did those three things, their lives and their relationships could be so much better. And I've always had to prioritize those things because even as a child, before I knew that I had all these other special things about me, I was very sickly. And so I had to always take exceptions that other people didn't. Um, so I was always sort of out of the norm. And it's helped me in other ways where sometimes I just wanted to be a normal person. I said to Lance the other day, I'm like, I almost feel like a real boy. And it's just so, and he's like, I'll tell Geppetto. So I'm just having a lot of fun with this process. And I'm sitting around, writing in my journal, taking extra time with, and you think to yourself, well, I don't have time for this because some of these exercises that I'm doing in my class are 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. But do we really not have time to be getting to know ourselves and practicing noticing our feelings and our thoughts and our breath? There's the simplest thing like going for the walk, a big thing we're learning in our class. And it's in all of these different mindfulness classes are we must take breaks. If you push yourself too much, you're going to end up not following through. If you do too much too soon, which we learn with bipolar, you'll fizzle out and you're not going to continue your routine. So we must take many breaks, many breaks. Mhm.
Love it. If we were going
I
to
love it.
wind up our episode, which is either a word of encouragement or a word of advice for our listeners,
Yes.
I would say we each offer that to our listeners. I'm going to offer two things that have helped me personally. One is a very short daily to-do list of only 2 items that are essential. And then if I accomplish those 2 items, I don't label myself a failure. I don't allow that to happen, even though none of us are failures ever.
Sure.
2, I was a student of Bob Proctor before he died, and that's not super relevant, but he just shooting for good enough and get it out there and just shoot for 80%, a B minus. To me, that has very much helped me. I mean, Allison thinks I'm so productive, but I'm like, but none of it's really that great. None of it's perfect. But then Matt Rudd says every draft is like a working manuscript. Everything is an iteration, you know, so perfection isn't really the goal. If you're wanting to try something new, I would say just shoot for 80%.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, first of all, can I tell a joke that I
Oh,
wanted to
sure.
tell? Okay, so let me tell this joke that I had 2 meetings at the same time. I had my class and I had my team meeting, and I chose to try it at my team meeting, which was the wrong audience to try it at because no one had first of all ever seen the movie Annie Hall at my
Oh,
team.
that's so
It was
fun.
just the wrong audience. And it's a Woody Allen movie, and I'm gonna try it with accent. Okay. I was thrown out of NYU my freshman year for cheating on a metaphysics exam. I looked into the soul of the boy sitting next to me.
That's so funny.
Okay. And so to me, maybe that sums up my word of encouragement and my little tip of the day is, you know, I gotta laugh at myself. I gotta start taking myself less seriously. And at the same time, I gotta see how we're all just in the same boat. I got to see how we're all just trying to alleviate our own suffering and the suffering of each other. And when it looks like somebody is judging you, I really feel like in a funny way, they probably are judging themselves, or they're just really just trying to love you.
That is so beautiful, Allison. Thank you for that. That was really beautiful, and it touched me really deeply on a wound I was holding in my heart in that moment. So, thank you for that.
Thanks, Jenell.
All right, I think it is time to wrap up our recording. So I will say, until next time, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, Jenell. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah. All right.